So those are the two promises I can make. It is Shabbat Hagadol, the Shabbat right before Pesach. It is, even by New England standards, unseasonably cold outside. And I think, or at this point, I'm just cold permanently. I don't know what it is. But I am sure that we can generate warmth and joy and energy as we approach Passover, beginning just tomorrow evening. So my enormous thank yous again. It is incredible to have, somebody said to me last week, there was still music. And that's a gift, because music is part of how we pray in this community. And so thank you too so much for helping us with this prayer. And we're going to start with the words of Hine Matov, how good it is to be together in community. Page 2. And you know what I never knew, but I knew, but I forgot I knew? The page numbers are already up there. So all of my announcing pages is completely useless, but it makes me feel so good. Oh, well, it's a little page number. There you go. So I'm still helpful. Beginning last week, our community has taken the opportunity to dive a little more deeply into Pesach in preparation as it approaches. We had 2 text studies last week, one on Friday evening where we talked about the arc of the Pesach story and how we tell that story. And then I was lucky enough to have some of you on Saturday as well, and we talked about how we end that story. But just to summarize what can't be summarized, of course, the Talmud says we start the story in degradation and we end in freedom. We start a story that ends in narrow places, in constriction, in the sense of stuck. And we dare to speak about an alternative reality, about a sense of hope, about the idea that we can move from that stuck place. And we call that freedom. The way we embody that journey is part of what we're going to discuss in our text study tonight, and it's part of what we embody in our seders coming this weekend or next weekend, depending on how you're timing them out. It's also part of how some of us will eat for this next week, with the avoidance of chametz, of leavened foods. I could spend hours just getting into what counts as chametz and what doesn't, but I won't. You're welcome. Because to me, what's actually interesting about chametz is what it makes us think about and what it helps us do. Chametz is, of course, removed from our homes, from our cars, from our places of work. I've seen people scrubbing their car. It's really impressive. It's not my car. There's nothing going to help my car at this point. But I've always, when people get really into the cleaning, I always think, I want to be inside their head and know what it is that they're thinking. What is it representing to them as they lift this thing that is part of their daily lives and remove it for a week? In many Hasidic traditions, chametz represents our own internal obstacles, our own negativity. And the idea is that if you take the week of Passover to notice each of those obstacles, each moment when you feel stuck in a pattern that doesn't feel helpful anymore, that we could clear them out a little bit, that we could emerge at the end of the week feeling different on the insides. And so each time you reach for a piece of bread or a piece of pizza or a matzah or matzah pizza, another terrible idea, each time it's an invitation in the Hasidic tradition for us to turn inward, to notice, to keep track of the tendencies that keep us where we don't want to be, and to believe that we don't have to be there forever. Rabbi Tova Spitzer of Dorshei Tzedek, just over the river, teaches that chametz can represent non-food items that clutter up our lives as well. The things that we tend to get stuck on, that we find our mind repeating over and over and over again, even if it's not going anywhere. I could have done that conversation better. I should have. I might have. All of those are moments where we can take this week to decide how they serve us. Because that's the thing about chametz, right? Sometimes it serves us. For most of the weeks of the year, pasta's just good. Don't tell my nutritionist I said that. It's probably not what he'd like you to know, but it is. It's what we need. It's how we live. And those are important things. And it's important that we learn to think about them without degrading them. But it's equally important to notice when we're trapped by them, when we're stuck in them, and when we're not choosing them, when they're choosing for us. So this night before Pesach, there is still challah here, I promise, a last bit for each of us. This Shabbat Hagadol, we are invited to consider what chametz we have yet to search for. We know that when Pesach ends and we celebrate our freedom, we will look around at those who are not yet free. And in this country, that is a growing list. And we know that we have work to do with them and for them. But this Shabbat and this week, we are granted the time and the space in community to consider before we begin. And what a gift it is to have that time. It is so beautiful to be with each of you on this Shabbat before we begin Pesach and our journeys. We're going to begin by adding light into our community, into our hearts. Page 1, I'm announcing the page numbers anyway. It's going to take me 10 years to get rid of that habit. Would anybody like to add a little light here this evening kindle our candles. It's not a test of your match striking ability, I promise. Oh, sure. Come on up. Great. I love that. Come on up.
Is it a free-for-all?
It is. It's a free-for-all. I love that. Here you go. So if you light from there. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat Shalom. Make sure you have introduced yourself to anybody who might be within speaking distance to you and wish them a Shabbat Shalom. We are so lucky to be in community together. We're going to turn to page 11, let's call it, for the shortened form of Lecha Dodi. We'll sing Lecha Dodi, invite Shabbat into our community. When we get to the part that says Shabbat Shalom, where we repeat it over and over again, it's an invitation for you to rise and to literally let Shabbat come into this sanctuary, to turn to the back, to face her, to welcome her. And if we have anybody on our Zoom who has their screens on, we will be able to wish them a Shabbat Shalom as well. Standing, we turn to page 16, inviting each other home into this sanctuary of prayer with Baruch Hu, dear one. Let some of us call and some of us respond this Shabbat, and you can decide which one you are.
Eyes
page 17, the Shema, the invitation to listen for the unity that connects all life, to live our lives in a way that acts as witness to that truth. Please join me. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. You may be seated. On page 18, we find the V'ahavta, the words that invite us to live our lives in response to the unity filled with acts of love. We'll chant the first paragraph of page 18 and then move directly to the second paragraph of page 20 if you're following in the books. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha v'hayu ha'devarim ha'eleh asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha v'shinamtam levanecha v'divarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha uvlechtecha b'derech uv'shokbecha uv'kumecha ukshartam le'oda yadecha v'hayu l'totafot b'einecha uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha leman tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'tem kedoshim lelohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim lihiot lachem le'elohim ani Adonai Elohechem. The bottom of page 21, we find the words the Israelites sang when they crossed to freedom this week in particular. To sing these words is all the more powerful in community, but also the fact that we sing it every week. The fact that each week we are reminded of freedom and possibility and hope. We join in these words of Mi Chamocha. Words of freedom in our hearts and our ears, we turn to page 25, rising in body or in spirit for the Amidah.
Shemo be'ahava, Melech ozer u'moshiach u'magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Ve'ezrat Sarah. Atah gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechayei hakol atah rav le'hoshia, Mechakeh chaim b'chesed, Mechayei hakol berachamim rabim, Somech noflim berofei cholim, Umatir asurim, Umekayem emunato lishenei afar, Michamocha ba'al gevurot, Umido mehelav, Melech meimi, Umechayeh, Umatzmiach Yeshua. V'ne'eman atah le'hachayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayei hakol. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, U'kedoshim b'chol yom yahalelucha selah. Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh. Since October 7th, we have tried to direct at least some of the prayers of this sanctuary to those who were taken hostage on that day, those who have been held hostage from the war that has unfolded since then on both sides of the border, in Israel and in Gaza. If Shir Tikvah has taught me anything, it's that hearts can expand infinitely, that there can be enough room in our hearts for everyone. Perhaps at moments it feels like our hearts might break from opening them up so wide. But in community, we can hold each other and hold each other's hopes and hearts. And so for 552 days, 552 Shabbat gatherings, once every 7 days, we have offered our prayers using the words from about the year 1000, which feel painfully relevant today. As Pesach approaches, I can't help but hope. This is the last time we recite this prayer in this sanctuary. If not, we will keep going. Please join me. Our family, the whole house of Israel, who are in distress or in captivity, who stand either in the sea or on dry land, may the Omnipresent have mercy on them and take them out from trouble to blessing, from darkness to light, and from oppression to redemption, now, swiftly, and soon. Amen. We turn to page 130, turning our hearts to those who are in search, in need of healing, hope, praying for a refuah shlema, a complete healing, healing of body, of mind, of spirit. If you are joining us digitally and would like to add somebody's name to our prayers for healing, I invite you to use the chat function to share the name of those you are praying for. On our community's healing list, we pray for Barney W., Rick Stephen, Carol Zimmerman, Riva, Amy Travis, Batya Simcha, Robin Cassell, Sandy Waxman, Dan Fine, Liliana Wolheim Martinez, Lynn Bishop, Harriet Snyder, Ann Cobble, Ed Snow, Stanley Roth, Ayelet Gal Batchava Vaher Shmuel, Tori Macia, Kyle Warren, Sarah Kianowski, Mort and Nancy Hoden, Grant Taylor, Dave Carbonneau, Ken Doucette, Debbie Gilman, Neil Daniels Midman, Frank, Andy, Joyce, Marcia M., Laura Bell, Jenny Vanderpool, Annie Graham and her family, Anya Kabel, and Sue Boardman. If there's somebody you'd like to add to those we are praying for, I invite you to raise your hand. It'd be an honor to call on you.
My sister Nancy's got you. No one come.
For all those named, for all in need, I pray the words of Misha Berach on page 130. Turning back to page 31 and continuing our prayers for shleimut, for wholeness, and shalom, for peace, with Oseh Shalom. Turning to page 44. Turning our hearts to those who stand in moments of memory. As we say these words of mourners Kaddish together in community, we are keenly aware that each of us is in our own world and also completely connected to the person next to us in this sacred act of remembering. And for many, these spring holidays that come with memories of people who taught us what it means to be at the turn of a season. And so we open our heart to all those whose presence we feel and whose legacy we carry. This week we honor the yard site of Dov Zimmerman, the father of Leora Zimmerman. We are in the year of remembrance for Pat Urich, Sivan Ehrlich, and Jan Amsterdam. If there is somebody who you would like to remember, we will say the names, and then we have a special remembrance right before we say the words of mourners Kaddish. Rabbi Rim and his dear friends are here joining us digitally, and we're going to have the opportunity to hear about who he is remembering. But I'd like to ask you to add your names first so that we're carrying all of these names together.
My grandma, Rita Marie.
My aunt Dorothy Peoples.
My granddaughter,
Elizabeth King.
Rabbi Rim is going to join us. He'll be up here too. I just look that way. Rabbi Rim, we see you.
You hear us?
Faintly. Try saying something else so we can see if we can turn you up.
Shabbat shalom, everybody. Okay, I think we got it. Rabbi Cari, we want to thank you, Ann Lieber, absolutely, and the whole Shir Tikvah community for giving Rim and me the opportunity to share some memories of our dear friends, Steve and Marlene Perrin. Steve died on April 10th, 2009, at the age of 63, and Marlene followed him 4.5 months later. They have both been gone for more than 15 years, and they died way too young. Thanks to Shir Tikvah and Zoom, the investment this community made in being hybrid, we have the opportunity to share this remembrance of Steve and Marlene's legacy with their sons, partners, and their grandchildren. Joshua and Audrey, Kelly, Zach, Ella, and Millie. So glad to have you here. And we miss Caleb and Ezra and Judah and Moses. We are here because of the joy of having Ella, the second in birth order of the grandchildren, here in Boston at Tufts, fighting the good fight to live well in the face of complexity of this world, the complexity of which I know would make her grandparents sick at heart. And we will be seeing her tomorrow night at Seder. We are so grateful for that.
The lesson of Steve and Marlene's life is how to flourish in whatever circumstances we're given. I met Steve in college, September 1964, and we walked together to the movies. He was the person who helped me realize that I didn't have to call my mom to tell her where I was. He was my adult. He showed me freedom and taught me how to shave and be dapper. Both lessons I didn't learn very well, as you can see from the picture of this dapper man. I'm sorry I don't have a picture of Marlene. He had a high school sweetheart, Marlene Baynard. One of my friends wrote that Marlene and Steve were a stunning couple. They had grace and ease. My friend said that Steve was bright and witty and a real charmer. And he was the grown-up of our group, editor of the college newspaper. He would speak to the dean if we needed to say something. I think everyone needs a grown-up as they themselves are growing up. In 1968, we graduated college and Steve went to Washington University Law School. This is 1968. A few days after moving there, he was drafted into the Army for Vietnam. He and Marlene packed up their belongings, came back to Silver Spring, Maryland, and Steve reported to the Army camp for his physical. I remember Steve's mom telling me that she sat with Marlene that night. She told me she sat with her in silence, not knowing what to say to her daughter-in-law. He came back the next day having flunked the physical, but the law school option seemed too hard to return to at this point, and he worked as a civil servant in the U.S. government for the rest of his life. They made a powerful family together in Columbia, Maryland.
They faced loss and illness and gave love and solidity to their two sons, even as they often seemed to me to be handling one health crisis after another. Marlene was an incredibly strong woman. I loved her dearly. She was smart, straightforward, kind, generous, and knew how to laugh fully. She had a group of women around her who became family too. Steve and Marlene were great partners.
If I had asked Steve from where did he get his resilience, he would have said that first of all, it came from Marlene. And second of all, he would have said in a kind of very grown-up way that he did what life demanded of him, what needed to be done. He was always such a grown-up. We treasure knowing them 16 years after their deaths. We still treasure them and talk about them often. We're grateful for all of the people who surround us with love in this life. But many of those who we loved, as I'm sure for people here, many of us whom we loved, we now have them in memory only. So I'm very grateful for this time with Stephen Marlin's legacy.
The formal ritual laws of Judaism don't offer a framework for deep grief for the passing of friends. The nature of life, however, is that if we are lucky, we have great friends, and sometimes we bury them. We are grateful for their lives and for all of you sharing this remembrance with us.
May the friends we loved join us at our Passover Seder this year. Thank you very much, Rabbi Cari, and everybody at Shir Tikvah.
May you all have sweet Passover.
Thank you for allowing us to share that memory, and I will just say thank you for helping me remember those who I remember in different ways and in a different light. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit as we turn to page 44 for the words of Mourner's Kaddish, inviting those who live in our hearts into this community. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra chirte v'yamlich malchute, be'chayechon uv'yomechon, uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kari v'imru amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mivarach Leolam Ulamei Almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shmei Dekudisha Brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Damiram be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba min Shamaya, V'chaim Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, V'imru Amen. Se shalom b'mromav, Hu yaseh shalom, Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, Ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, V'imru Amen. May the one who makes peace in the heavens make peace for us, for all Israel and all who dwell on earth. Let there be freedom for all. As together we say. Amen. You may be seated. Can I take that? I bet I can't. Nope. I'm not gonna break it. He's the chair of the ritual committee. He can break it. All right. So last week we talked about the story, and I promised that this week we would talk about the food. What is, when you think Passover and the Pesach table, what do you picture? And I'll give you a hint. There's a picture of it right now. Raising your hand? No, you weren't raising your hand? Don't, dangerous sitting in that front row. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Charoset.
Tell me why charoset.
Because it's so yummy.
Because it's so yummy, right? And what's so funny about charoset being so yummy? What is charoset? It's the mortar of the bricks, right? So it's a perfect example of what I want to talk about today. Well done.
I was actually thinking the sandwich I make with matzah and
Haroset.
Haroset, thank you.
And maror, right?
But I wanted to say that the reason I think about it is because of its mortar, and I think of its building, and I kind of take the meaning away from what the story is about us being slaves, building and I think of it as building my life.
Ah, beautiful. So that's another thing I wanted to talk about today. Great. So you take this activity that we're supposed to do where we build the sandwich,
right? And the Haggadah says to you, this is what you're supposed to think about when you're building the sandwich. And what you say is, nah, I'm going to go a different way with it, right? I love that. So we have two things that happen with our symbols, right? We have a symbol that has multiple meanings tied to it, even from within the tradition, such as the sweetness and the difficulty all being mashed together in the maror, in the haroset, not in the maror. That is not sweet. And we have this, okay, here's a symbol, but because of your life experience, you take the form and you change the meaning while you're sitting there, right? What else happens with our food? What else jumps out at you about our food habits or our eating habits or the things on the Seder plate? Andy and then Judy, yeah.
I think the lamb bone really has to be mentioned because, first of all, the lamb is where Passover came from. That was where it is from. And then the bunch of us who are doing Daf Yomi have spent days and weeks reading about lambs in ways you wouldn't want to know about. So,
Right, so the lamb bone, right? If we think back to the story, we put a shank bone on our table, or a beet if you're in a vegetarian home, and remember that in the story a sacrifice was offered, and in particular a lamb sacrifice was offered, and the angel of death passed over, quite literally, right? Yeah.
Matzo balls.
Tell me about matzo balls,
Well,
and
they're
tell
not
me
like
which
a-
kind you like. Floaters or sinkers? There is a right answer.
Floaters.
Floaters. I knew I liked you, Judy. Sorry. No offense to anybody who likes a sinker, of course. Tell me about matzo balls.
But there's no section in the Haggadah that says this matzo ball we eat. What meaning has it?
Okay, good. So I like this. So this is another point, which is sometimes we have things that we think of as central to the holiday, and they are absolutely not in our Haggadah, right? Last week we talked about the story, which, let's face it, is pretty poorly told in most Haggadahs. So we have, it's not Pesach without my mom's matzah balls. Thank you, Mom, for being here. And no pressure. But it's not, it comes from the tradition, not from the text, right? And so you have this meeting of the two that happens in our foodways, yeah. Other foods that, Andre, yeah.
Well, I think of the orange on the Seder plate, honestly.
Okay.
Which is, again, another symbol that's been added.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about LGBT, I
Inclusion.
forgot my words, sorry.
That's okay. Inclusion?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So Andre comes up with a perfect example of another thing that we do when we are preparing our foods, which is we think about the story and whose story needs to be told. And whose story needs to be told sometimes means we need to add things to our table. So one of the things that we have added is the orange to a Seder plate. There are many, many, many other additions. They are as central to the telling of the story as a matzah ball is to the experience of being at Passover, and so this table that we set is literally always changing because of them, right? Lynn?
So I remember during the pandemic, and maybe folks saw it, it was this viral video. A bunch of people got together and did a Seder. And there were traditional elements like Adina Menzel singing Ma Nishtana, beautiful. But then Dan Levy, who's this Canadian comic, for the greens, he said, well, all I've got is a jar of stale pickle relish or something like that. Will that do? And it was kind of like that. It was funny, and people were making do and couldn't get what they usually had in the grocery store. And I think it was about carrying traditions forward in new ways and making do with what we've got, even if we don't have that family around us in this huge table with too much food. It was about resilience, and that was one of my favorite videos.
Yeah, resilience and its role, not just in the story, but in how we enact the story. That's a beautiful example. I was discussing beforehand with Dana the fact that in our biblical text, I just went out, didn't I? You have no idea what I'm saying. Now you do. Now you do. Okay. Yeah, it's great. Train of thought. Yeah, in your biblical text. Thank you, Annie, for being in my head. That's great. In our biblical text, there's a Pesach Sheni. If you are somewhere and you cannot celebrate Passover, you are told you don't get out for the year. You do it according to the text a month later. And how many have been to a Seder that is not on the first or second night? I think many people. And I always think of Pesach Sheni and this idea that built into the tradition is the idea that the tradition has to be accessible to you, and that you need to be willing with yourself to be flexible enough to make the tradition accessible. Annie?
So we did that the second year of the pandemic. Could not bear another Zoom Seder. Waited a month so we could be outdoors. One of the best Seders I've ever been to.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Neil, did I see your hand? No? Okay. Hi. They can't hear you if you're not in the mic, so I apologize about that.
In the mic.
In the mic.
If you want me to get in it.
You need to actually crawl in and be one with the mic.
Well, I just want to say something really simple about dipping the parsley in salt water. I just think it's really lovely. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Can you explain lovely? Like what?
Well, it has a rejuvenating quality to it. I think because of the care that is really forced on us. You have to hold it, you have to dip it, then taste it. So it's like a little ritual, and it generally just wakes me up. It wakes the body up.
Yeah, I love that. The way you described it, there's a gentleness, and so much of the Seder is not particularly gentle. The breaking of the matzah, or the, and to think of that moment as it stands out in how we move, and what that then does to how we're experiencing ourselves and our bodies. That's beautiful. Yeah, Judy. Yeah.
Just thinking about what Hai just said. Parsley is something we eat all year round, and many of us grow it in the summer. But on Passover, we eat it in a different way. You don't just eat it as a separate food ordinarily. So it just makes you look at what's around you and experience it.
Yeah, I love that, right? That which is normal gets an entirely new context by the way we interact with it, right? And that then changes how we look at sort of everything in that moment, as an invitation to shift our perspective on what we assume is the way we're supposed to be interacting. So these are all beautiful ideas and things that are happening at our Seder table. I want to introduce a little bit of text into this on matzah, because when I think Pesach, I will admit the first thing I come up with is matzah. And I don't know if hearing all of you, I think maybe I would like to think differently, actually, but this is what I come up with nonetheless. And it is spoken about in two very different ways, and that I hope to study with you, and also I hope you leave with the sense of invitation from matzah, which is a sentence that doesn't make sense yet. You're all thinking she's lost her mind, I hope. But I hope by the end you will understand what I mean by an invitation from your matzah. So, anybody want to be our first reader of text? Andre. You can just do the English at the bottom. This is from Exodus 12, verse 39.
And they baked the unleavened cakes of the dough, and they had taken dough that they had taken out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, since they had been driven out of Egypt and could not delay, nor had they prepared any provisions for themselves.
Good. Any questions about this text, comments about this text, thoughts about this text?
What struck me is the heading is the bread of freedom, and we both in our Seder and in many people's minds, the first thing we say is the bread of affliction.
Good.
And those are very different concepts.
Okay. So why would I call this verse the bread of freedom? Well, I'm going to give you the microphone back then.
Well, because it was the first thing people were able to eat once they had been on their way to freedom.
Right, right. So this is this idea that this story that we tell that the Israelites baked matzah on their back and it didn't have time to rise, right? And we take for granted, or I have often taken for granted, the idea that therefore it's a sign of how hard that was. You didn't even have time to make bread? Oh my goodness, that's difficult. But instead, actually, this text seems to invite a question of, well, is that what they're saying about this bread? Or is what they're saying about this unleavened bread that, in fact, it was the first thing they put in their mouth as free people in 450 years, which is a very different bite of unleavened bread than bread that you just took and ran with, right? All right, can we have the next slide? Who wants to be my reader now? You guys, you're not that quiet, come on.
You shall not eat anything leavened with it, for 7 days thereafter you shall eat unleavened bread, bread of distress. For you departed from the land of Egypt hurriedly, so that you may remember the day of your departure from the land of Egypt as long as you live.
Good. So this one, if you read my title at the top of my slide, is the bread of affliction. And what in this text stands out as different from the last text? Yeah, Andre.
Well, it seems almost like saying, now we're going to remember I forgot the word again. Yeah, the bad parts where we came from.
Right. Good. So this word remember, right? Remember where you came from is a key piece of the bread of affliction, right? It's hearkening you back, not to remember you got free, potentially, but to remember where you came from. And it names the emotional valence for you, right? That first text, it didn't name it. It just said, you're going to eat unleavened bread because you put flour and water on your back and you ran, right? And because I think of this text, which tells us it's a bread of affliction, we tend to read this into that other text, right? We tend to look at matzah and think it's the bread of affliction. But actually, the text seems to be inviting you to think about it in two very different ways, right? One of which is, this is the bread that reminds you of how hard it was. It's the charoset right? In bread form, it is the labor and the work and the slavery and all of that. And then another text seems to be an invitation to instead eat that very same bread and say, this is the bread that we first tasted when we were free. It's the chocolate-covered version of the bread. It is definitely, that is the dessert one where you could also use saltines and nobody knows the difference. But I cooked that with the 6th graders this week, by the way. They were very good and excited about it. But there seems to be, it's actually, the chocolate-covered one seems to negate the point of this, right? And I make a lot of the chocolate-covered matzah, so I'm gone again. But well, I have one here, so if I put 2 up there, I'm going to get myself in a lot of trouble with the people in the back of the sanctuary. But the text itself seems to want you to be able to look at the same item and tell 2 very different stories about it, right? And then Caroline, you can just pass it.
At the risk of being obnoxious, maybe it's not so different, so that you may remember the day of your departure from the land of Egypt. So, for you departed from the land of Egypt hurriedly. So this is really about the leaving. It's not about what happened before that, this particular text.
So, right, except that the difference really only seems to be the way they name the bread of distress, right? In one they don't name it, and in one they name it with the emotional valence, right?
Oh, well, the name is different, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's really key, Hai. I think what you're saying is really important, which is it doesn't even have to direct you to 2 different things, right? It doesn't, one directs you to slavery and one directs you to freedom. It almost seems like it's an invitation to consider just the act of remembering is supposed to be bringing you to 2 ideas at the same time, right? That there is affliction and freedom, and it seems like they're afraid you're going to lean towards one or the other, so they use almost the same set of words, but then they say, this one we have to name for you, right? So you don't miss it, which is important. Yeah, but you can just pass to Caroline.
I was thinking about the 2 different places in the Exodus versus Deuteronomy. And that Exodus feels to me like it is the telling as it's happening, and Deuteronomy is the rules later. And it made me think that often when we are going through hard things, we are in the moment and we are making the best of it and we are surviving. And afterwards, we have to, or we can choose to remember how hard it was or not. We can block it out, right? And I think that that's sort of how I'm reading this, that one, the remembering is like so that you don't forget how hard it was when you had that freedom, and that was great, your matzah, to have that as your first food, and don't forget.
Yeah, no, beautiful. And I think you're doing a little bit here what I heard from Nan, which is you're telling a story about this. They're giving you a symbol and they're giving you the names of the symbol, and you're saying, okay, those are good names, but here's how these ideas actually happen in my head, right? When I see that, this is where I go with that story. Beautiful, yeah. We're gonna go that way. Sorry, I didn't mean to skip you.
Oh, I'll be quick. This is kind of stream of consciousness, but thinking of affliction and freedom being 2 sides of the same coin, it reminds me of this thing. I think a rabbi said that when something breaks, it lets the light out, like you can start to see the light. But without that fissure, the light would be trapped. And so sometimes from really bad pain can come really beautiful beauty.
Beautiful. So here's another layer on top of this connection between affliction and freedom, right? That affliction is real. It's not denying it, and there's possibility that you might not have had as that might be present there. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Similarly, there's a song I've been playing and singing recently, and it's really stuck in my head. It's by a sort of a newgrass musician called Billy Strings, and it's a song called Gilda Lily from the album he put out last year, and it's a very sad song about, the basic theme of it is, I would like to sing along with the birds, but I don't know the words. But there's a line that really sticks in my head, which is, you don't know who you love until you miss them.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful, Annie.
So it's interesting to me, this idea of freedom versus affliction, the positive and the negative, because one of the things that I've struggled with since October 7th, particularly about Passover, is that we need to not just remember the hard part of all of this, but also all the positive that has flowed from that, because we have to remember that the objective here is not to nurse our grievances, shall we say, but to meet our obligation to the liberation of everyone else who is still in chains.
Beautiful.
And so, yeah.
So this connection is live today, right? And how you think about what you're reading in the news. Beautiful.
So bread of freedom and bread of affliction, we're sitting around our Passover table. There's always a lot of food and people around, except during the pandemic. And it's similar to Sukkot, which is kind of the same thing, where we're supposed to live out in a booth to remind us that we were living in the wilderness. So I think it's kind of very Musari. It tells us we have a lot of wonderful things. We have our freedom, we have our family, we have our food, but none of it's without trade-offs or without a price. And as far as Haggadahs go, I think my favorite one is, I think it was in 2017, the immigrant, or the highest Haggadah, the immigrant Haggadah. So I'll just throw that out there. And since then, we've all had a lot of different ones. But everything we had, it's just, we shouldn't take it for granted.
Thanks. I think building on what Lynn and Annie said, it just occurred to me. I just realized in the book of Exodus, when the Israelites left Egypt, they were rich. They had silver and gold, and they had tapestries, all kinds of things that the Egyptians given them, and yet they were eating the bread of affliction. And so most of us are going to be in nice, comfortable houses tomorrow night, and we will do the same thing.
Yeah, really interesting. Thank you. Dante. Oh, sorry, Andy.
I think part of the juxtaposition of these two for me is the I get to versus I've got to. At the first night of Passover, you get to eat matzah, and many of us don't really mind it that first night, and we may be putting yummy things on it. We may be putting harosot on it. We may be putting, chopped liver on it, whatever it's going to be, dipping it in our soup. And it's novel, and it's good, and it's crunchy. And as the week goes on, you start to feel like I've got to eat matzah. What can't I eat? And I think a lot of life is that way, where it's sort of, what's your mindset? What are you bringing to it? And in this holiday in particular, it's important to remember both. Whether we're thinking about people who are free and not free, whether we're thinking about obligation versus responsibility, whether we're thinking about what we can or can't eat, it's always a two-sided coin.
Beautiful.
I think I'm just thinking about the idea that I definitely see, we have, people are starving in Gaza, and we're going to sit and celebrate freedom, but also our own people are also in captivity.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Yeah, Andre, I think that's beautiful. I think the complexity of freedom and affliction when you think about the news right now, and when you think about your own place in the stories right now, it can leave you with sentences that don't seem possible to finish, right? That there's just no clarity available. And yet, I think that there's never been clarity. That Lynn mentioned the Musar tradition, which tends to put things on sort of two ends of a spectrum, and you have to find where you exist in between them, you know. And I, when you said Musar, I sort of went, freedom and affliction, and they're not separate, right? That they often end up affecting each other in pretty deep ways. So I think that Pesach, with all of its prescriptions, right? You should eat this, you shouldn't eat that, you have to dip this and that 3 times, not 4 times, whatever it is, 4 cups, not 3 cups. You know, the whole, it's should. And yet, I think that if you look at the symbols, they're an invitation to, Rim used to use the word, it cracked me up, complexify. I loved that word from Rim. Thank you, Rim, if you're still here. To complexify your story. And I am curious if either you had planned to add something or reinterpret something or bring something that is necessary for the holiday, even if it's nowhere in the written canon of the holiday. I'm curious what tomorrow night you are bringing that can fit into these ideas of complexifying our symbols, because they need it. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. My mom's a psychologist, and she edited our Haggadahs many years ago. And so instead of the wicked child, it says the misunderstood child is gently asked to explain where he's coming from, or I forget what exactly it says, but so we have the misunderstood child in our family. Very respected, very...
Perfect example, right? You take something that comes from the tradition that has no place at your table. You also don't abandon the children, right? And you shift how you address that child sitting at your table. I love that. We also have a misunderstood child at my Seder, by the way. And I'm not actually talking about my children in that situation. Well, but yes, that's a perfect example of it. Other examples that are coming to your tables, either this weekend or some other time. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if it counts as complexifying or not,
like it.
but my Haggadah, we don't tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
We go from the 4 whatever to the 4 whatever to 4 questions for discussion that tell the story. And I have to rewrite the questions every year or people get bored. So
I think that counts as complexifying.
I guess. I'll send you this year's edited version.
I would like to see the questions, please. Martha, did I see your hand? Are you complexifying in any way? No?
Complexifying, but we don't have
No, so I think you are complexifying, right? You're taking this ancient story and you're saying, we've been praying for the hostages in this sanctuary for over 500 days. We're not going to sit down to a meal that celebrates freedom without them, right? And so we're gonna tell the story of now and what freedom is and isn't right now. So you're complexifying it, yeah. Oh, Sarah's here. Usually we get to see her on the screen, and she's here. That's so exciting. I love when people come home from college. Other examples that are going on in people's homes as they, yeah, Dante.
One of the things that I keep thinking about, and we talked about a little bit last week, is the idea of the plagues. And I want us to really talk about not in my name. That even though we understand why they were there and how they're part of our story, because I feel like that we can take and broaden to what's going on in the world around us, both in our country and in Gaza, where it's sort of like, wait a minute, and kind of like, yes, I want to defend Israel vehemently, and yes, I think Israel has every right to exist, and yet I don't want to bomb other people out of existence. So please don't do that in my name, and please don't say you're doing that for me. And I think for me, the plagues have that same resonance, which is, we used to think it was something to celebrate, but wait a minute, in order for, when Moses went through the Red Sea, the people people behind us drowned. That's not insignificant.
Beautiful. And in fact, there's many a midrash, or a very famous midrash, that the angels started celebrating, and God says, "They're my people too," right? So we have to be able to be joyful for our people, joyful for who we are, joyful and celebratory. You can't shy away from your own joy. And you have to complexify how you talk about, how you enact, how you symbolize those who aren't in the same place that you are in, right? So I want to be mindful of time because we have to cook tomorrow. I mean, I have to cook tomorrow. Wait, I mean, you have to cook tomorrow. I don't cook. By the way, I don't cook, so it's not a problem for me. But I want to invite you to look at a symbol tomorrow, if you're looking at symbols, and to complexify it. To tell a story, whether it relates to now in your life or now in the world, or any piece of the story you want to explore, and tell a different one. Just challenge yourself while you're sitting there to tell a different story. I want to... You're not going to hear what I want to do. Oh, okay, yes, you are. I want you to hold something at some point this week and see it in a different context and see how that changes for you. And I want you, if you can, to add something. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it comes from the text. I don't care if it doesn't come from the text. But your story affects this story. So when you add something, we evolve. We change. And I think we can only become stronger the more voices that get added. So I want to wish you all 3 activities and a Zis Pesach, a sweet Passover. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. 3, you're adding something
You're looking at something that you might use regularly in a different context. So parsley was the example of that, right? You never just eat, well, maybe you eat parsley, but probably not that frequently. And you're going to look at something and you're going to tell a new story about it. So tell it in a context, take it, understand its original context, and put it in a different one for yourself. And you don't have to do it at the Seder, but for Pesach. And you might find at the end a different story. Shabbat Shalom. Oh, wait, we have to do Kiddush and Motzi. Really got this rabbi thing down. Killing it up here. Mom and Dad, back from 3 weeks in India, and I get to call you up. Come on up. India for 3 weeks. My parents are world travelers. I cannot keep up with them.
Do you know what time it is?
No. We'll do short Kiddush, okay? This is my mom and dad, in case you don't know them. Ready? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. You can drink short. You just got back from India. Do you guys match so that if you're traveling anywhere in the world, you can find each other? Please join me in a motzi. Reach out to the person in front of you or towards me. Make a connection, and we'll lean on each other. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
We should eat it. It's going to be our last bread.
That's right. There you go. Shabbat Shalom, come grab challah. There's an oneg downstairs. I think I really have finished the service at this point, so you can get up safely.